That night, Mom texted, "This year, only your sister's family." I typed back, "Have fun," and put the phone down. Looking out at the snow-covered Wyoming Valley, they didn't know I'd just bought a $6 million estate in Silver Basin. I spent my whole youth waiting for a congratulations. This year, I'm not waiting. I invited everyone else. My name is Tess Calloway. I am 33 years old, born on the coast of Maine where the fog clings to the pines like a memory. Today, I split my life between the rain-washed streets of Portland and the vast, silent expanse of Wyoming. The silence is newer. The silence is mine. The text message from my mother tonight didn't create a new wound. It just pressed on a very old one. A bruise so deep it's part of the bone. It's a hollowness I've learned to build around, to insulate. The insulation, it turns out, is a 6-bedroom house on 48 acres of mountain. I remember standing in the regional science fair gymnasium when I was 12. The air smelled like waxed floors and nervous sweat. My project, a functioning model of a tidal power generator, took second place. I gripped the heavy, royal blue ribbon all the way home, the embossed gold letters pressing into my palm. I walked into the house, and Mom was on the phone, laughing. I waited. When she hung up, I held it out. "Second place, Mom." She glanced at it, her eyes already moving past me toward the stairs. "That's nice, dear. Did Brooke tell you? She made captain of the varsity cheer squad. They're deciding on uniforms today." She was already walking away, calling my sister's name. I stood there, the ribbon suddenly feeling thin, the metal medallion cold. I just wanted her to ask a single question about how it worked. It became the rhythm of my life, the quiet second place. When I was 15, I taught myself to code a simple script. Our family photos were a disaster. Thousands of digital files scattered across hard drives with no labels. I spent a month writing a program to sort them by date, location, and even using basic facial recognition I'd learned from an online tutorial. I was proud. It was useful. I brought my laptop to Dad, my fingers tapping the keys to show him the interface. "Look, Dad, you just drop the folder here, and it organizes everything. No more searching for that one Christmas from 5 years ago." He watched for about 5 seconds. He gave my shoulder a quick, hard pat. "Clever, Tess. Real clever." Then he turned toward the kitchen. "Hey, did you hear? Brooke's float for the Lobster Festival won Most Original. We've got to figure out where to put the trophy." I closed the laptop. I deleted the script. If it wasn't a trophy, if it wasn't loud and shiny, it didn't seem to count. The anchor didn't just slip. It was cut. I was accepted into the Northwind Institute, a top-tier tech university a few states over. It was my one and only choice. I got a partial scholarship, and my parents covered the rest. The transaction as impersonal as paying a utility bill. In 4 years, they never came to visit. Not once, not for Parents' Weekend, not for the robotics showcase where my team's project was featured, not even just to take me to dinner. My roommate's family was there so often I knew her little brother's favorite jokes. My family was a void. They were busy. Brooke was planning her sorority's spring formal, then her engagement party, then her wedding. The wedding. It was a production that could have rivaled a royal coronation, held at a seaside club in Maine. My sister, Brooke, married Evan, a man whose family owned half the lobster boats in the state. It was a merger. I was, technically, a bridesmaid, but I was in a different dress from the others, a muted color that matched the helper staff. I spent most of the reception running errands. "Tess, can you find the coordinator? The string quartet is taking too long." "Tess, run to the kitchen. Tell them to put out the gluten-free options now." I was fetching, carrying, buffering. I remember standing in the industrial kitchen pantry, surrounded by cooling racks of hors d'oeuvres, just to breathe for a minute. I watched my parents through the serving window, beaming at Evan's parents, their faces lit with a pride I had never, ever earned. After graduation, I moved to Portland and took a job at Harborline Software. It was a good, stable tech company. I was a competent engineer. I did my work, collected my paycheck, and sat in my gray cubicle, staring at code I hadn't designed. I was good at optimizing other people's ideas, but every line I wrote felt wrong. It felt like I was building someone else's house. I knew, with a certainty that terrified me, that I had to build my own. My first startup was a disaster. It was a social media app for local artisans, a concept that was all heart and no business model. I burned through my savings in 8 months. I ended up with thousands of dollars in credit card debt, living in a studio apartment that smelled like mildew and old plumbing. My desk was a cracked hollow core door I'd found in an alley, laid across 2 stacks of printer paper boxes. I was eating ramen and canned beans, and the shame was so thick I could barely breathe. I hit a wall. I called home. A desperate, last-ditch effort. I got Dad on the phone. I didn't even ask for money. I just asked for advice. I laid it all out. The debt, the failed idea, the fear. There was a long silence on the line. Then, his voice, flat and final. "Well, Tess, maybe you're just not cut out for business. There's no shame in it. Harbor Line would probably take you back." Not cut out for business. The words echoed in that tiny, damp room. They weren't meant to be cruel. They were meant to be a fact, a judgment. He had looked at me for 5 seconds and made his decision. Something in me snapped. It wasn't loud. It was a quiet, cold, structural shift. I hung up. I didn't cry. I got angry. I didn't go back to Harbor Line. Instead, I got a job bartending. And during the day, I went back to school online. I didn't study passion projects. I studied the most boring, most complex, most critical systems I could find. Supply chain logistics and data security. I learned how the world actually moves, from a shipping container in Shanghai to a warehouse in Ohio. And I found the flaw. I found the gap in the data stream where security was weakest. I founded HarborFlux. It wasn't glamorous. It was software for managing and securing logistics data. A B2B platform that corporations would pay millions for because it saved them billions. My office was a tiny, windowless room I sublet from a failing accounting firm. The first 6 months were a blur of Kieling exhaustion. I lived on instant noodles and coffee, working 16-hour days, 7 days a week. I was the CEO, the lead coder, the janitor, and the entire sales team. I didn't just build the product. I willed it into existence through sheer, stubborn force. The breakthrough came at 5:17 p.m. on a Tuesday. I had been cold calling and emailing for months, getting nothing. Then, a reply. An executive from a massive, fictional Great Lakes transport conglomerate wanted a demo. I spent 48 hours straight preparing. I did the demo. They grilled me for 2 hours. At the end, the executive nodded once. "Send the contract." That was the first domino. 2 years later, after a growth period so rapid it felt like holding onto a rocket, the acquisition offers started. I held out. I negotiated. And then, the final offer came in from a tech giant, $310 million. When the wire transfer cleared, I sat in my empty apartment, a nicer one this time, but still spare, and just watched the number on my bank's website. It didn't feel real. My first instinct, the one beaten into me by years of trying, was to call home, to finally show them the trophy. I picked up the phone. I looked at the contact, Mom. I thought about the conversation. "Oh, Tess, that's wonderful," followed by the inevitable. "Did you hear Brooke is pregnant again? They're finally getting the new nursery wing built." I thought about my father's words. "You're not cut out for business." I put the phone down. I said nothing. The silence of my success was my own. I bought the estate in Silver Basin, Wyoming, 2 months later. It was an impulsive, decisive act. A 6-bedroom main house built of reclaimed timber and glass. A separate 3-bedroom guest house. 48 acres of aspen groves and open meadows. All of it staring directly at the jagged, unforgiving face of the mountain. The main living room is walled in glass. It's like living inside the view. I'm not a rancher. I'm a software engineer. But I wanted land. I wanted a buffer. I wanted a place so large that their small, curated world couldn't touch me unless I allowed it. I hired an estate manager, Milo, a quiet local man with hands as tough as old leather, who understands the language of snow and generators. I hired a landscape architect to finish the grounds, to build stone pathways and fire pits that felt like they had always been there. I gave them one deadline. Everything had to be finished, perfect, and provisioned by mid-November. I knew, even then, what I was building. It wasn't just a home, it was an alternative. My name is Tess Calloway. I am 33 years old, born on the coast of Maine where the fog clings to the pines like a memory. Today, I split my life between the rain-washed streets of Portland and the vast, silent expanse of Wyoming. The silence is newer. The silence is mine. The text message from my mother tonight didn't create a new wound. It just pressed on a very old one. A bruise so deep it's part of the bone. It's a hollowness I've learned to build around, to insulate. The insulation, it turns out, is a 6-bedroom house on 48 acres of mountain. I remember standing in the regional science fair gymnasium when I was 12. The air smelled like waxed floors and nervous sweat. My project, a functioning model of a tidal power generator, took second place. I gripped the heavy, royal blue ribbon all the way home, the embossed gold letters pressing into my palm. I walked into the house, and Mom was on the phone, laughing. I waited. When she hung up, I held it out. "Second place, Mom." She glanced at it, her eyes already moving past me toward the stairs. "That's nice, dear. Did Brooke tell you?" She made captain of the varsity cheer squad. They're deciding on uniforms today. She was already walking away, calling my sister's name. I stood there, the ribbon suddenly feeling thin, the metal medallion cold. I just wanted her to ask a single question about how it worked. It became the rhythm of my life, the quiet second place. When I was 15, I taught myself to code a simple script. Our family photos were a disaster. Thousands of digital files scattered across hard drives with no labels. I spent a month writing a program to sort them by date, location, and even using basic facial recognition I'd learned from an online tutorial. I was proud. It was useful. I brought my laptop to Dad, my fingers tapping the keys to show him the interface. "Look, Dad, you just drop the folder here, and it organizes everything. No more searching for that one Christmas from 5 years ago." He watched for about 5 seconds. He gave my shoulder a quick, hard pat. "Clever, Tess, real clever." Then he turned toward the kitchen. "Hey, did you hear? Brooke's float for the Lobster Festival won Most Original. We've got to figure out where to put the trophy." I closed the laptop. I deleted the script. If it wasn't a trophy, if it wasn't loud and shiny, it didn't seem to count. The anchor didn't just slip. It was cut. I was accepted into the Northwind Institute, a top-tier tech university a few states over. It was my one and only choice. I got a partial scholarship, and my parents covered the rest. The transaction as impersonal as paying a utility bill. In 4 years, they never came to visit. Not once, not for Parents' Weekend, not for the robotics showcase where my team's project was featured. Not even just to take me to dinner. My roommate's family was there so often I knew her little brother's favorite jokes. My family was a void. They were busy. Brooke was planning her sorority's spring formal, then her engagement party, then her wedding. Ah, the wedding. It was a production that could have rivaled a royal coronation, held at a seaside club in Maine. My sister, Brooke, married Evan, a man whose family owned half the lobster boats in the state. It was a merger. I was, technically, a bridesmaid. But I was in a different dress from the others, a muted color that matched the helper staff. I spent most of the reception running errands. "Tess, can you find the coordinator? The string quartet is taking too long." "Tess, run to the kitchen. Tell them to put out the gluten-free options now." I was fetching, carrying, buffering. I remember standing in the industrial kitchen pantry, surrounded by cooling racks of hors d'oeuvres, just to breathe for a minute. I watched my parents through the serving window, beaming at Evan's parents, their faces lit with a pride I had never, ever earned. After graduation, I moved to Portland and took a job at Harborline Software. It was a good, stable tech company. I was a competent engineer. I did my work, collected my paycheck, and sat in my gray cubicle, staring at code I hadn't designed. I was good at optimizing other people's ideas, but every line I wrote felt wrong. It felt like I was building someone else's house. I knew, with a certainty that terrified me, that I had to build my own. My first startup was a disaster. It was a social media app for local artisans, a concept that was all heart and no business model. I burned through my savings in 8 months. I ended up with thousands of dollars in credit card debt, living in a studio apartment that smelled like mildew and old plumbing. My desk was a cracked hollow core door I'd found in an alley, laid across 2 stacks of printer paper boxes. I was eating ramen and canned beans, and the shame was so thick I could barely breathe. I hit a wall. I called home, a desperate, last-ditch effort. I didn't even ask for money. I just asked for advice. I laid it all out. The debt, the failed idea, the fear. There was a long silence on the line. Then, his voice, flat and final. "Well, Tess, maybe you're just not cut out for business. There's no shame in it. Harborline would probably take you back." Not cut out for business. The words echoed in that tiny, damp room. They weren't meant to be cruel. They were meant to be a fact, a judgment. He had looked at me for 5 seconds and made his decision. Something in me snapped. It wasn't loud. It was a quiet, cold, structural shift. I hung up. I didn't cry. I got angry. I didn't go back to Harborline. Instead, I got a job bartending. And during the day, I went back to school online. I didn't study passion projects. I studied the most boring, most complex, most critical systems I could find. Supply chain logistics and data security. I learned how the world actually moves, from a shipping container in Shanghai to a warehouse in Ohio. And I found the flaw. I found the gap in the data stream where security was weakest. I founded HarborFlux. It wasn't glamorous. It was software for managing and securing logistics data, a B2B platform that corporations would pay millions for because it saved them billions. My office was a tiny, windowless room I sublet from a failing accounting firm. The first 6 months were a blur of keeling exhaustion. I lived on instant noodles and coffee. Working 16-hour days, 7 days a week, I was the CEO, the lead coder, the janitor, and the entire sales team. I didn't just build the product, I willed it into existence through sheer, stubborn force. The breakthrough came at 5:17 p.m. on a Tuesday. I had been cold calling and emailing for months, getting nothing. Then, a reply. An executive from a massive, fictional Great Lakes transport conglomerate wanted a demo. I spent 48 hours straight preparing. I did the demo. They grilled me for 2 hours. At the end, the executive nodded once. "Send the contract." That was the first domino. 2 years later, after a growth period so rapid it felt like holding onto a rocket, the acquisition offers started. I held out, I negotiated, and then, the final offer came in from a tech giant, $310 million. When the wire transfer cleared, I sat in my empty apartment, a nicer one this time, but still spare, and just watched the number on my bank's website. It didn't feel real. My first instinct, the one beaten into me by years of trying, was to call home, to finally show them the trophy. I picked up the phone. I looked at the contact, Mom. I thought about the conversation. "Oh, Tess, that's wonderful," followed by the inevitable. "Did you hear Brooke is pregnant again? They're finally getting the new nursery wing built." I thought about my father's words. "You're not cut out for business." I put the phone down. I said nothing. The silence of my success was my own. I bought the estate in Silver Basin, Wyoming, 2 months later. It was an impulsive, decisive act. A 6-bedroom main house built of reclaimed timber and glass. A separate 3-bedroom guest house. 48 acres of aspen groves and open meadows. All of it staring directly at the jagged, unforgiving face of the mountain. The main living room is walled in glass. It's like living inside the view. I'm not a rancher. I'm a software engineer. But I wanted land. I wanted a buffer. I wanted a place so large that their small, curated world couldn't touch me unless I allowed it. I hired an estate manager, Milo, a quiet local man with hands as tough as old leather, who understands the language of snow and generators. I hired a landscape architect to finish the grounds, to build stone pathways and fire pits that felt like they had always been there. I gave them one deadline. Everything had to be finished, perfect, and provisioned by mid-November. I knew, even then, what I was building. It wasn't just a home, it was an alternative. The phone screen was too bright in the dim room. It cast a blue, sterile light on the dark wood beams above me. I'd been watching the first real snow of the season start to accumulate on the pines. Then the vibration, a text from Mom. I knew what it was, in the way you know a cold front is coming. This year, we're just inviting Brooke's family and the kids, keeping it small. The message was shorter than a sigh. Just family, the implication hung there, heavy and unspoken. I was not family, I was the satellite, the optional attendee, the designated dishwasher. I looked at the words, keeping it small. My thumb hovered. I could fight. I could type. I'm family too, I could ask. What did I do? I could send a link to my Zillow listing. Instead, I just typed, have fun? I hit send and set the phone face down on the cold granite countertop. My hand was shaking. It was partly the residual chill from being outside, but mostly, it was the old, stupid reflex. The deep-seated, 12-year-old's craving to be recognized, the itch to perform, to present evidence of my worth, to beg for a seat at the table. The old feeling rose up, tasting like dish soap and resentment. I saw last Thanksgiving in sharp, cold detail. I was at the sink in their main kitchen, my hands raw, scrubbing the roasting pan that wouldn't fit in the dishwasher. In the next room, I could hear the explosion of laughter. Mom, Dad, Brooke, and Evan, all crowded on the sofa, watching my nephew, barely 3 years old, stack blocks and knock them over. Oh, look at him, Mom's voice, high and bright. He's going to be an engineer. The actual engineer, scrubbed harder at the caramelized turkey grease. I had just closed a Series B round of funding for Harbor Flux. I had tried to tell them about it over dinner. Dad had nodded, said, "That's nice," and immediately asked Evan about his new boat. I grabbed my heavy wool coat and stepped out onto the wide stone veranda. The cold was immediate, a clean slap to the face. The air was thin at this altitude. I breathed it in. Down in the valley, the lights of other distant estates were just beginning to prick the blue twilight. The mountains were massive white shadows against the darkening sky. I decided, right then, not to fight, not to beg. Why was I still trying to get into a house that clearly didn't want me? I remembered something my grandmother, June, told me once. She was the family outlier, the one who read books instead of watching TV, the one who lived alone and seemed to enjoy it. I was complaining about being excluded from one of Brooke's pre-wedding parties. June didn't offer sympathy. She just looked at me over her glasses and said, "Tess, when the front door is locked, you stop knocking. You go open the back patio and set a damn table." I went back inside, the cold clinging to me, but the shaking in my hands had stopped. It was replaced by a familiar, focused energy, the energy I get when I've identified a problem and am designing the solution. I sat at the massive oak table in the great room and opened my laptop. The glow of the screen felt different now. It wasn't sterile. It was a tool. I pulled up an old file, a spreadsheet I hadn't opened in years. Thanksgiving guest list master. It was a list my mother had shared with me years ago, back when I was still helpful, asking me to manage RSVPs. I scrolled through the names. My gaze snagged on the column labeled Status Last Year. Uncle Ben. Status, not invited. Aunt Lila and Uncle Mark. Status, not invited. My cousins from the coast, Karen and Mike, and their kids. Status, not invited. It wasn't a guest list. It was a kill list. A roster of people slowly, quietly curated out of the family unit to make room for Evan's parents. Evan's business partners, Brooke's shiny new life. The excuse, I recalled, was always keeping it cozy, or just the immediate circle. My mother's definition of immediate had just shrunk again. This time, I was on the outside of the circle. Fine, I'll draw a new circle. I highlighted Uncle Ben's name. He was my father's younger brother. He was the one who, after seeing my second-place ribbon, had actually asked about the tidal generator. He'd taken me to the real science fair in Portland the next year, the one with robotics and university scouts. I hit the call button on my phone. He picked up on the third ring. Tess Calloway. Now that's a name I haven't seen in a while. How are you, kid? I'm good. Uncle Ben, I'm really good. Quick question. What are you doing for Thanksgiving? A heavy sigh on the other end. Oh, your aunt's making a small bird for just the two of us. We haven't gotten the invite from your folks in, must be 3 years now. Did they ever say why? Your mother called the first year. Said they were trying to keep things intimate now that Brooke had the kids. Wanted to reduce the stress. Funny, I never thought I was stressful. His voice was light, but the hurt was there, layered under the sarcasm. It's not you, I said, my voice hard. She just told me the same thing. This year. I'm the one being cut. What? But you're their daughter. Apparently not the right one. Listen, new plan. How do you and Aunt Clara feel about Wyoming? There was a beat of silence. Wyoming? Tess, what are you talking about? I bought a place, a big one, and I'm setting my own table. I'm sending you 2 first-class tickets, non-negotiable. I could hear him smiling. Well, I'll be... Okay, kid. Okay, we're in. I hung up and immediately called my Aunt Lila. My mother's sister. She was a painter. Always considered too bohemian by my mom. She confirmed the same story. A polite, chilly call 3 years ago about keeping it cozy. She's building a fortress. Tess, Lila said, her voice dry. And she only wants perfect, shiny soldiers inside it. You were never shiny. Dear, you were smart. That's much more threatening. Come to Wyoming, Aunt Lila. Bring your watercolors. The view is insane. Done. My fingers flew. I sent a text to a group chat. Reese and Priya, tea-day plans? These were my friends from Northwind, my real family. Reese, who had shared his notes when I had the flu, and Priya, who had talked me out of quitting after my father's phone call. Reese replied instantly, was gonna order takeout and binge that new sci-fi show. Priya added, my flight home to Vancouver is $400, so same. I typed, change of plans. Check your email in 5. You're coming to me. Bring winter boots. I spun around in my chair, looking at the grand, empty, fire-lit room. It suddenly felt too quiet. It was a stage waiting for a play. I closed the old guest list and opened a new, blank spreadsheet. Silver Basin Thanksgiving, Year 1. I started typing, the clicking of the keys echoing in the vaulted ceiling. Column A, guest name. Column B, flight status. Column C, room assignment. Uncle Ben and Aunt Clara, first class, room, guest house, suite 1. Aunt Lila, business class, she needs the leg room. Room, main house, east wing. Cousin Karen and Mike, 4 tickets, economy plus, for the kids. Room, guest house, bunk room plus suite 2. Reese, Priya, room, main house, west wing. The guest house had 3 bedrooms. The main house had 6. I had 9 bedrooms total. I was booking Karen and her family into the guest house, Ben and Clara in the other, Lila in the main house, Reese and Priya in the main house. I still had 4 empty bedrooms. I kept typing. Task, transport. I booked 4 executive shuttle vans from the fictional Jackson Airport for the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. Task, overflow. The list was growing. I'd invite my old neighbors, the ones who gave me cookies. I'd invite a few of my first employees from Harbor Flux, the ones who believed in me when my office was a closet. I called the Spruce Lodge, the nicest hotel in the small town 18 minutes away, and reserved a block of 12 rooms under my name. Task, food. This couldn't be me, stressed and scrubbing a pan. This had to be different. I thought of Chef Mateo, a brilliant local chef who had lost his restaurant during the pandemic. I'd heard he was running community cooking classes for kids in town. My foundation, an anonymous one I'd set up as soon as the acquisition cleared, had funded that program for a full year. He didn't know it was me. He just knew a Portland tech fund had saved his project. I found his number. Chef Mateo, my name is Tess Calloway. I'm a huge admirer of your work, especially what you're doing for the kids. I have a last-minute, slightly insane proposal for you. I'm hosting about 35 people for Thanksgiving, and I want them to have the best meal of their lives. He laughed, a warm, rich sound. 35? Last minute? That's not insane. Ms. Calloway, that's a challenge. I'm in. Task, document. I wanted this remembered, not as a filtered, perfect Instagram post like Brooks, but as something real. I found the website for a local photographer, Nova. Her portfolio was all candids, moments of quiet truth, snow on eyelashes, hands gripping coffee mugs. It was perfect. I hired her for the entire day. Task, gifts. I locked my laptop and walked down the hall to the room I called the closet. It was really a full-size study, lined with cedar shelves, for the past year. As I waited for the house to be built, I had been collecting things, not just buying, but finding. I opened the door. The smell of cedar and leather and new paper filled the air. I hadn't known why I was buying these things. Now I did. For Uncle Ben, a top-of-the-line, graphite fly fishing rod. The rivers here were world-class. For Aunt Lila, a vintage, Art Deco pin I'd found at an estate sale in Portland, the kind she used to wear in the 80s. For Priya, a first edition of the sci-fi novel she and I had obsessed over at Northwind. For Reese, a high-end whiskey-tasting set with 3 bottles I'd had imported. Each gift was a piece of evidence, a receipt that proved, I listened, I saw you, I remember. I stood in the middle of the room, surrounded by proof. I wasn't just hosting a dinner, I was curating a family. I looked back at my phone, still face down on the counter. The screen was black. No follow-up text from Mom. No, are you okay? No, we'll miss you. Of course not. I was the second-place ribbon, the deleted script, the empty chair. I picked up the phone, but only to check the weather forecast. Clear skies until Wednesday. Perfect. I whispered it, to the big, empty, quiet house, to the dark mountains outside the glass. This dinner is for the people who actually asked how I was. And for the first time all night, I felt warm. The spreadsheet was no longer a list. It was an operational plan. The next morning, I sat with my laptop and a fresh mug of coffee, the steam rising into the cold air of the great room. It was time to execute. I started sending the messages, 35 of them. This was not a copy-paste job. Each one was a retrieval, a small piece of evidence. To my cousin Karen, who I hadn't seen in 4 years. Karen, it's Tess. I know we haven't talked, but I've never forgotten how you drove 2 hours to sit with me in the hospital waiting room when I had my appendix out in college. You brought me a terrible gossip magazine and a great bag of pretzels, and it was the kindest thing anyone did for me that whole year. I've bought a home in Wyoming. I'm inviting everyone who ever showed up for me. I want you, Mike, and the kids here for Thanksgiving. I'm handling all the travel. Please say yes. She replied in under a minute, a string of chaotic, excited texts. They were in, to Ben, my first ever mentor at Harborline, the one who taught me to read a balance sheet and told me I wasn't bossy. I was executive ready. Ben, I owe you a thank you that's about a decade overdue. You taught me how to be in a room. I'm hosting my first Thanksgiving at my new place, and it wouldn't exist without that first push you gave me. I'd be honored if you and Sarah would come as my guests. The fly fishing in November is apparently challenging, but I have a feeling you'll manage. His reply was more formal but just as fast. Tess, I am floored. We would be delighted. One by one. I went down the list. To the 2 junior coders from Harborflux who stayed up with me for 72 hours straight to fix a critical bug before our launch. The ones I had to pay in company stock because we had no cash. To my old neighbor from Portland who always shoveled the walk to my door, not just his own. To Reese and Priya, to my aunts and uncles and cousins. Each message was a key, unlocking a small, forgotten room of my past, with every yes that came back, every "we're in," and "are you serious?" The house felt less like my fortress and more like their destination. It was filling up before anyone had even packed a bag. Then came the logistics. This was my language. I opened my travel portals, my accounts with more commas than I was used to. This was the part my parents, with their careful middle-class anxieties, would never understand. I wasn't spending, I was deploying. For Uncle Ben and Aunt Clara, both in their late 60s, I booked 2 first-class, lie-flat seats, no cramped legs, no stressful connections. For Cousin Karen and her family, with a toddler and a 5-year-old, I booked them in business class, the privacy, the extra space for the kids to wiggle, the ability to board first. It wasn't a luxury. It was a necessity. I was buying their peace of mind. For Reese and Priya and my younger ex-colleagues, I booked economy plus aisle seats, with a note on my file to upgrade them at the gate if first class wasn't full. The flights all routed through the fictional Jackson Airport. I emailed my transport contact. I need 4 luxury vans, the ones with the good suspension and room for luggage. I need them on call, rotating to and from the airport all day Wednesday. I'll send you the flight manifest. Done. The guest house was full. The main house was full. My spreadsheet's room assignment column was a solid block of text. I called the Spruce Lodge, the beautiful, rustic hotel down the road. Hi, I need to confirm that block of 12 rooms I reserved. The manager was crisp. Yes, Ms. Calloway, 12 rooms, guaranteed for 5 nights, all charges to your card on file. Perfect. The infrastructure was built. Now, the experience. An email came in from Chef Mateo. It was the proposed menu. My mouth watered just reading it. He wasn't just roasting a turkey. He was building a feast. Apple cider brined, slow-roasted heritage turkeys, a smoked ham with a rye whiskey and clove glaze, butternut squash soup with sage butter croutons, wild rice stuffing with mushrooms and pecans, creamed pearl onions, Brussels sprouts roasted with bacon, and for dessert, not just pumpkin pie, but a mountain berry crumble with berries he'd foraged and frozen in late summer, and a dark chocolate bourbon torte. I replied instantly, Mateo, this is perfect. One request for the dining setup. I have a 30-foot table being delivered tomorrow. I want it placed in the great room, right in front of the glass wall, looking out at the pines and the mountain. And for centerpieces, no big floral arrangements. I want clusters of low, unscented candles, dozens of them. I want to be able to see everyone's face, from one end of the table to the other, no obstructions. An excellent choice, Ms. Calloway, he wrote back. The light will be beautiful against the glass. We'll make it happen. I spent that afternoon in the gift room. I had the graphite rod for Uncle Ben and the Art Deco pin for Aunt Lila. I pulled out the other items, a set of professional-grade illustration markers and sketchbooks for Karen's 5-year-old, who she'd mentioned loved to draw, a signed biography of a female astronaut for her toddler, whose name was Nova, a leather-bound journal for my cousin Mike. I wrapped each one myself, using thick, cream-colored paper and dark green velvet ribbon. No glitter, no shine, just substance. My estate manager, Milo, found me there. He didn't knock, just appeared in the doorway, holding a clipboard. Ms. Calloway, just letting you know, I've run a full diagnostic on the backup generator. It's fully fueled, and the transfer switch is instantaneous. We're good for at least 12 hours of a full house load if the power goes. Thank you. Milo, what's the forecast? Light snow starting tomorrow, tapering off by Wednesday afternoon. Just enough to be pretty. Nothing that will stop the planes. He nodded toward the window. I'll have the main drive and all the pathways cleared and salted before the first van is due. You think of everything, Milo. That's the job, ma'am. He tipped his hat and was gone. A few hours later, a car crunched up the gravel drive. It was Nova, the photographer. She was young, with sharp eyes and no extraneous gear, just 2 cameras on her shoulders. She didn't want to talk inside. "I need to see the light," she said. I watched her from the window as she walked the property for an hour. She didn't just look at the mountain view. She knelt to frame a shot of the frost on the sagebrush. She aimed her lens at the worn handle of the woodshed door. She came back in, stamping snow from her boots. "This place is honest," she said, which I found to be a strange, perfect compliment. "My plan is to not be noticed. I'll be here when the first guests arrive. I'll shoot the moments, not the poses, the open kitchen, the deck, the trail down to the trees. People forget a camera when they're warm and full. That's what I'll get." That's exactly what I want. That evening, with the logistics humming and the house ready, I sat down to do the one truly difficult part. I opened a new document and typed, "Welcome." I needed to say something at that table. I needed to thank them. I stared at the blinking cursor. How do you thank people for the absence of pain? For simply being normal and kind? I typed, "Thank you all for being here. Some of you have known me my whole life. Some of you have known me for only a few years. But every person at this table has one thing in common. You showed up." I kept writing, a short tribute to the power of just being present, to the people who ask questions and actually listen to the answers, to the people who bring you pretzels in a hospital, or who see your potential in a spreadsheet, or who drive you to a science fair, to the people who, when they had nothing to gain, offered their time and their kindness. When I was done, I saved the file. I walked to my office, the one room Milo hadn't been allowed to show the architect, the one room I kept locked. Inside, on the wall, were the framed magazine covers: Forbes, Wired, The Economist, Tess Calloway, the invisible force behind global logistics, the $31 million coder. I looked at them, the trophies, the proof, the things I had once desperately wanted to show my parents. They looked flat. They looked like paper. I turned off the light, walked out, and locked the door. This weekend wasn't about them. It wasn't about what I had built. It was about who had held the ladder. One last call to make. I dialed, my heart doing a familiar, nervous little kick. She picked up on the second ring. June's hotline. "Hi, Grandma. It's Tess." "I know who it is, dear. I see your name on the little screen. How is my favorite hermit?" "I'm good, Grandma. The house is done. It's a lot. I'll bet big houses are just big boxes to put your loneliness in, sometimes. That's why I'm calling. I'm filling it. For Thanksgiving. I've invited everyone. Ben, Lila, Karen and her kids, some of my friends, about 35 people." There was a long, appraising silence on the line. I could hear her breathing. Well, she said finally, her voice rich with something I couldn't identify. "So you finally went and built your own table." "I'm calling to invite you, Grandma. I'll send a car, a private jet, if you want, whatever it takes." She laughed, a dry, papery sound. "Oh, you and your money. A private jet. What would I do with that?" She paused. "I appreciate the offer, Tess, more than you know. But my health these days, it's at the whim of the weather. My legs aren't what they were. You all have your fun. I'll be fine right here." "Are you sure? I could send a doctor with you?" "Don't be dramatic. I said I'll be fine. You just leave it. Tess, I know how to manage. You have a wonderful time. And you call me after. Tell me if Ben's gotten any better at telling jokes." "I will, Grandma." "Good. And Tess, I'm proud of you. Not for the house, for the invitations." She hung up. I stood there, holding the phone, feeling a strange mix of disappointment and resolve. She'd said no, but she'd seen it. She'd seen the real point. The night before the first guests were due to arrive, I stood in the kitchen. Chef Mateo and his team had already been there, prepping. The whole house smelled, impossibly, of cinnamon, slow-cooked onions, An orange peel. A light, impossibly perfect snow was falling outside, the big, quiet flakes drifting down past the glass walls. The house was ready, the stage was set, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't worried about my performance. I was just ready for the curtain to go up. The first sign of trouble came on Tuesday, the day before the first guests were scheduled to arrive. My phone rang, displaying Chef Mateo's name. "Ms. Calloway," he said, his voice confused, which was not a tone I associated with him. "I'm glad I caught you. I just received a very strange phone call. A woman claiming to be your assistant. I didn't know you had one. Called my office. She said your plans had changed, that you had a family emergency, and that the entire Thanksgiving dinner was canceled." The air in the room went cold. I looked out the window at the peaceful, snowy landscape. "Mateo, I do not have an assistant, and that call was a lie." "That's what I thought," he said, the relief in his voice palpable. "The number was blocked. It felt off. I'm so sorry." She sounded quite convincing, said you were distraught. "I just wanted to verify before I canceled my suppliers." "Thank you for calling me directly," I said, my voice steady, even though my heart had started a hard, fast rhythm. "The dinner is absolutely on. I have 35 people flying in tomorrow. Whatever that was. It was malicious. Consider it handled. Chef, I'll see you Thursday." I hung up and stood very still. This wasn't an accident. This was sabotage. This was an active attempt to dismantle my plans. My mind immediately went to my mother, to Brooke. Would they go this far? To call and impersonate someone? It felt petty, desperate, and, unfortunately, familiar. It was the digital equivalent of hiding my running shoes before a track meet, something Brooke had done in 9th grade. An hour later, the phone rang again. It was the front desk manager at the Spruce Lodge. "Ms. Calloway, we have a bit of a confusing situation here, and I wanted to clarify before we release any of your rooms," she said. "We just had a Tessa Calloway with an A call and cancel her entire block of 12 rooms. The name was so similar to yours, and she had the exact dates, but the credit card she used to verify the cancellation was different, and it was declined. It flagged your account, and I thought it best to call the primary." My knuckles were white on the phone. "I did not call you. My block for 12 rooms stands. Please put a note on the account. No changes are to be made by anyone, for any reason, unless I show up in person with my ID. Is that clear?" "Crystal clear, Ms. Calloway. We'll lock the reservation." This was coordinated. 2 calls, 2 different attack vectors, both aimed at the core infrastructure of the event: food and lodging. This wasn't just a petty jab. This was a logistical assault. I called Milo on the house intercom. "Milo, can you come to the great room, please?" He was there in a minute. I explained the 2 calls. He listened, his expression unchanging, just his eyes narrowing slightly. "That's something," he said. He pulled a tablet from his vest pocket. "It might be related to this. I got an email this morning, supposedly from Property Management Services, telling me our order of supplemental firewood was being rerouted due to a billing discrepancy. It looked legitimate, but the domain was spoofed. They misspelled WYOMING in the signature line." "They spelled Wyoming wrong," I repeated, the absurdity of it cutting through the anger. "Yes, ma'am." I checked the IP address from the email's header. It wasn't from a local server. It routed through a series of public proxies, but the origin point pinged back to a residential server in coastal Maine. Maine, of course. "They're not even good at this," I said. It was an impulse, a bit of dark humor. "Amateurs," Milo agreed, without a trace of a smile. "But they're noisy. What do you want to do?" "Lock it down," I said. "All vendors, all suppliers, they get a new password. Spoken, from you or me, for any changes. All deliveries are to be met at the gate. Nobody comes onto the property without one of us clearing them first. And check the firewall on the house network, just in case." "Already did," he said. "It's solid." He was about to leave when he paused. "Oh, and the weather update came in. That light dusting they predicted for Thursday? It's been upgraded. They're calling for a moderate storm system to move in around noon on Thanksgiving Day. 6 to 8 inches expected by evening. Nothing we can't handle, but it's going to get rough in the afternoon. Right, that's an external problem. I can handle those. I thought for a moment. Okay, let's adjust the plan. I'll text everyone. We'll move the main dinner time. Instead of 5 p.m., we'll eat at 3:30. That gives us plenty of time to eat before the storm hits its peak. It'll be cozier. Anyway, darker outside. Means we'll need more heat on the veranda if people want to step out, Milo said. Add the propane heaters. Put the basket of wool blankets by the door. We'll be fine. He nodded and left. I stood there, the silence of the house pressing in. They weren't just ignoring me. They were actively trying to make me fail. They weren't content to have their own perfect Thanksgiving. They had to burn mine to the ground. And then, as if summoned by the thought, my phone lit up with a name I hadn't seen in months. Brooke. I stared at it. I could let it go to voicemail, but I knew that would just be seen as a victory for her, proof that I was avoiding them. I took a breath and answered. Tess, hi. Her voice was high and bright, the one she used for strangers and sales clerks. Hi, Brooke. I was just calling to, see what you were up to for the holiday, since Mom kicked me out. I heard the unspoken words. She wasn't calling to apologize. She was calling to confirm, to check if I was alone, to see if I was sad. She was calling to collect the data. I'm busy, actually, I said, my voice cool and even. I'm hosting. A split second of dead air. The silence was so complete, I could hear the tiny digital hiss of the connection. Hosting? She said, the brightness faltering. Hosting who? Your friends from Portland? Just family, I said. I let the words hang in the air. A perfect, sharp echo of the text message that had started all of this. The part of the family that invited me. Another beat of silence. Longer this time. I could picture her, in her perfect kitchen in Maine, her face tightening, her mind racing. She had expected me to be ordering a sad pizza. Oh, she said, that's nice. Ben and Lila, I guess. I have to go. Brooke, my guests are arriving tomorrow, and I have a lot to prepare. Wait, Tess. The superficial chatter kicked in, the panic button she always hit when she was losing control. Did you see what Evan got me for our anniversary? It's this incredible... I can't talk right now. Brooke, have a good Thanksgiving. I hung up before she could say another word. The like button on her life was officially closed for business. The final piece of the puzzle slid into place an hour later. A text message from a number I didn't recognize, but the name attached was a friend of my mother's, a woman from her garden club. Tess, dear, I'm just so worried about you. I heard you weren't feeling well and were canceling your Thanksgiving, but then I saw this. Is this true? Are you having a party? Attached was a screenshot. It was from my cousin Karen's private social media. It was a picture of her kids' suitcases, packed, with the caption, "Off to Wyoming to see Cousin Tess. We are so excited." My mother had weaponized her friends. She had her little network of spies, her image control committee, scouring the internet for any sign that I was not complying with the narrative that they were the center of the holiday, and I was the sad, lonely outlier. Karen's post had ruined that. I didn't feel anger. I felt a sudden, profound clarity. I saw the whole pathetic machine. I deleted the text. I didn't block the number. I just deleted it. It required no response. Instead, I went to my laptop and opened the security admin panel for the front gate. The system had a feature where I could send temporary access codes to guests. I looked at the setting, and then I deleted it. I changed the master setting. No new codes valid unless issued by admin. All existing temporary codes nullified. From now on, the only way in was through me. I was in the kitchen, updating my prep list, when Nova, the photographer, arrived to drop off some extra gear. She saw the tension in my face. "You look like you're debugging a live server," she said. "Something like that, just Family stuff? She nodded. I get it. The holidays are prime time for that. She held up the Polaroid camera she had slung around her neck. I have an idea. You're worried about making this feel right, aren't you? Making people feel welcome? I want it to feel like they belong here. Okay, she said. So let's do this. In the kitchen. You have that big, empty wooden wall by the pantry. I'm going to set up a small table with this camera, a ton of film, and some pins. As every single person arrives, I'm going to take their picture, just a simple, happy Polaroid, and we're going to pin it to that board, immediately, before they even take their coats off. I looked at the wall, imagining it. A welcome board, I said. Exactly. It's not a family tree with all the old baggage. It's a welcome home board, built in real time. By the time dinner starts, that wall will be full of everyone's smiling faces. It's a physical piece of evidence that says, you are here, you are part of this. Everyone who walks in sees themselves, and they see who else is part of their new club. It was brilliant. It was simple, tangible, and real. Nova, you're a genius. That night, after all the chaos, I did the last, most important task. I sat at the long, empty dining table. I had a box of thick, cream-colored place cards and a pen with dark brown ink. I started to write. Uncle Ben, I wrote on the first one. I paused, then flipped it over and wrote on the back. Thank you for taking me to the robotics fair. It mattered. On the next one, Aunt Lila, thank you for always telling me my paintings were interesting and not weird. On Reese's, thank you for sharing your notes and never making me feel stupid for asking questions. I wrote all 35, each one with a different memory, a different, specific piece of gratitude. I finished the last one for Karen's 5-year-old. Thank you for coming. I can't wait to see your drawings. As I was setting up the tables for the kids, I had one last thought. The veranda was just outside the glass doors. The stone would be slippery with snow and ice. The children would be excited. I went to the gift room and found a small box of tiny silver bells, the kind you use for craft projects. I went back and tied one, securely, underneath each of the high chairs and small booster seats. It was a simple, low-tech alarm. If a child got down and started to wander toward the door, I would hear them. The house was quiet. The preparations were complete. The attacks had been neutralized. The defenses were set. I picked up my phone. It was late, almost midnight. I had sent my grandmother a text that morning. Just a thinking of you, love you message. She usually replied within an hour. The message still said delivered. It didn't say read. I stared at the screen for a long, long time, my thumb hovering over her contact, willing it to light up. Nothing. The worry, an old familiar ache, returned. I told myself she was just asleep, that her phone was on silent, but the silence from her felt different from all the other noise. I plugged the phone in and set it on the nightstand. I couldn't do anything about it tonight. Tomorrow. My guests would arrive. Tomorrow. My new family would be here, and I had to be ready. The first van was scheduled for 1 p.m. on Wednesday. At 12:50, I heard the crunch of tires on the freshly salted gravel drive. I was standing by the door, my heart hammering against my ribs, suddenly terrified. What if they hated it? What if it was too much? What if this felt like a cold, corporate retreat instead of a home? The heavy oak door swung open, letting in a gust of cold, pine-scented air, and there he was, Uncle Ben. He stepped onto the flagstone floor of the entryway and just stopped. He was wearing his old parka, the one I remembered from my childhood. He looked up at the vaulted ceiling, at the massive timber beams, at the wall of glass at the far end of the great room showing the entire snow-covered valley. He slowly turned in a circle, his breath fogged in the air. "Tess," he said, his voice rough. He looked at me, his eyes wide. "All this is yours, kid?" "It's ours, Uncle Ben," I said, my voice thick. "For this week, it's all ours. Welcome home." I pulled him into a hug, and he held on tight. Aunt Clara was right behind him, crying softly. "Oh, Tess, It's beautiful. Come in, get warm. They kept coming. The second van pulled up right behind the first. My cousin Karen came through the door, herding her 2 children. She stopped just inside, her eyes closing. She breathed in, deeply. "What is that smell?" she whispered. "That," said a warm voice, "would be the apple pies." Chef Mateo emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a clean white apron, and the cranberry sauce simmering with orange zest. Karen's hand went to her mouth, and her eyes filled with tears. My mom's kitchen used to smell just like that." She looked at me, her face a mess of sudden, raw emotion. "I haven't smelled that in 20 years. "I'm so glad you're here, Karen," I said, hugging her. Suddenly, her 5-year-old shouted, "Snowslide!" and bolted past us. I turned. Milo, true to his word, had used the small tractor to build a perfect, gently sloped snow luge in the backyard. Right off the main veranda, the kids, bundled in snowsuits, were already scrambling up it. The sound of their shrieking laughter was the first real, joyful noise the house had ever held. Nova, the photographer, stepped forward quietly. "Welcome, Ben," she said. Raising the Polaroid camera, click whir. She took the small white square, waved it once, and then pinned it to the big, empty wooden board by the kitchen. Under it, she'd already placed a small, hand-lettered sign. "Welcome home." Ben stared at his own smiling, slightly stunned face. "Well, I'll be," he said. I let them settle, pointing them to their rooms, the guest house. Milo had already lit the fireplaces, and it was glowing with warm, yellow light across the snowy path. Aunt Lila arrived, sweeping in with a dramatic silk scarf, and immediately demanded the tour. "My goodness, Tess," she said, standing in the wood-paneled library. "This isn't a house, it's a statement." She ran her hand over the stone of the massive fireplace that dominated the great room. "This is solid. You built something solid." Reese and Priya were the last of the first wave. They walked in, looked at me, and we just had a group hug right in the entryway. A silent, 3-person reunion. Then Priya looked past me, through the wall of glass. Her hand tightened on my arm. "Tess," she breathed. "The view. You're living in a postcard. It's unreal." Reese just shook his head, speechless. He walked right up to the glass, as if he might fall in. "You own a mountain," he said. "I just own the part at the bottom," I laughed. As they settled, I brought out the gifts. I didn't want to wait until after dinner. I wanted this to be part of the welcome. I didn't want to do a big, formal thing, I explained, handing the long, sleek tube to Uncle Ben. "Just a little something to say I'm glad you're here." He unzipped it. He slid out the graphite fly fishing rod. He's not an emotional man, but he had to sit down. He ran his hand over the cork handle. "Tess, this is the Orvis Helios. This isn't a little something. This is, He looked up at me, and his voice was choked. "I don't know what to say, kid." "Say you'll teach me how to use it in the spring," I said. Aunt Lila unwrapped her small box. She pulled out the Art Deco pin, the flash of sapphire and silver bright against her hand. She gasped, a sharp, theatrical sound that was pure Lila. "You remembered," she whispered. "My grandmother had one just like this. I lost it years ago. Oh, Tess." She pinned it to her scarf immediately, her fingers trembling. "It's perfect." The house was alive. It was loud. It was chaotic. The kitchen was an impossible orchestra of smells. Butter browning, cinnamon, thyme, the deep, rich scent of the turkey stock. People were everywhere. Kids were running with cookies. Reese was explaining my security firewall to a baffled Uncle Ben. Priya and Aunt Lila were already deep in a conversation about color theory. Thanksgiving Day arrived with a low gray sky. By noon, the first flakes began to fall, just as the new forecast had predicted. By 2 p.m., it was a steady, heavy curtain of white. Milo was a silent, efficient shadow, moving along the stone pathways with a shovel and a bucket of salt and sand. The world outside the glass walls was disappearing into a beautiful, swirling blur. Inside, it only made the great room feel warmer, brighter. I put the final touches on the long table. The linen tablecloth was a thick, creamy white, just slightly rough to the touch. The crystal glasses, dozens of them, were polished. The low candles were lit, their flames reflecting in the glass and the silverware, creating a river of light down the center of the table. I took the handwritten place cards. I didn't put myself at the head of the table. I didn't put my parents' empty chairs there. Instead, I walked to one end and placed Uncle Ben's card there. At the other head, I placed Aunt Lila's, the eldest of each branch of the family. The ones who had been cut were now the anchors of my table. The low rumble of conversation filled the room, a sound so rich and complex it was like music. It was the sound of 35 people who were happy to be exactly where they were. At 3:15, just as Mateo's team was preparing to bring the food out, the doorbell chimed. It was a soft, melodic sound. I froze. Everyone quieted for a second. I wasn't expecting anyone else. I looked at Milo, who was already heading for the door, his face unreadable. Had they come? Had my parents and Brooke shown up, uninvited? Milo opened the door. It wasn't my mother. It was a man I'd only seen once, from a distance, my nearest neighbor, a recluse named Mr. Hartley, who lived in a smaller cabin about a half-mile down the valley. He was old, thin, and holding a pie tin wrapped in a dish towel. "Excuse me," he said, his voice quiet. He looked past Milo at the chaos, the warmth, the massive, noisy crowd inside. I just saw all the cars. I figured you had a full house, my wife, before she passed. She always made a pecan pie for Thanksgiving. I made one this morning. It's a habit, I guess. It's too much for one person." He held out the pie. I thought I'd return it for the company. I walked to the door, past Milo. "Mr. Hartley," I said, smiling. "That is incredibly kind, but you've come all this way in the snow. You can't just leave it at the door. Please, come in. We have more than enough food. We have an empty seat right here." He looked at me, then at the table, then back at me. "Oh, no, I couldn't intrude." "It's not an intrusion," I said. "It's Thanksgiving. Please, join us." He hesitated, then gave a small nod, stepping inside and stamping the snow from his boots. I haven't had a big dinner like this in, 5 years. Not since Mary passed." "Then we are honored to have you. Mr. Hartley, let me take your coat. And that pie smells incredible." I led him to the table. As I passed the kitchen wall, I glanced at the Polaroid board. It was completely full. The empty dark wood was gone, replaced by a dense, joyful mosaic of faces: Reese, laughing, Aunt Lila, holding her pin, Karen's kids, their cheeks red from the cold, Uncle Ben, holding his fishing rod, all of them, smiling, all of them, here. The blank spaces, I realized, were finally, completely, filled in. I tapped my spoon gently against the side of my crystal wine glass. The clear, high-pitched ping cut through the warm, rich hum of conversation. One by one, 35 faces turned toward me. The long candlelit table fell into a sudden, expectant hush. I stood, my hands feeling a little unsteady, my heart thumping a heavy beat against my ribs. This was the moment. I looked down the river of light, past the reflections on the silverware, the gleaming food, the faces of people who had flown across the country, and I took a breath. I started, my voice stronger than I expected. "I just wanted to say thank you. It's a simple thing to say, but I've never meant it more. Thank you all for coming, for traveling all this way, for trusting my very last-minute invitation." I looked from face to face. Reese, grinning at me, Aunt Lila, dabbing her eye with her napkin. I was thinking a lot this week about what makes a family. It's not just blood. It's not just obligation or showing up because you're supposed to. I think, for me, family is evidence. I saw my old mentor Ben nod slowly. It's the people who prove it. The people who ask how you are and actually wait for the answer. The people who, when you have a small, stupid, second-place ribbon, treat it like a trophy. The people who sit with you in a hospital, or share their notes, or tell you that you're smart, not weird. My eyes found Uncle Ben's. This dinner, this entire house, it's for you. It's for the people who showed up for me, in all the ways that mattered, especially in those times when I had absolutely nothing to give back. You were investing in me when I was a failed startup. So, this is your dividend. To all of you, to the ones who showed up, thank you. The room was silent for a beat, and then the glasses were raised. To Tess, someone called out. To Tess, the room echoed, a wave of warmth and clinking glass. As everyone sat, Uncle Ben remained standing. He cleared his throat, his big hand gripping his wine glass. He was not a man for public speaking, which made the gesture all the more powerful. We're thanking you, Tess, he said, his voice booming slightly. You're the one who did all this. I remember a 12-year-old kid in a damp gymnasium, trying to explain tidal power to a bunch of bored judges. She was always building things, always seeing a better way to put the world together. He smiled, a huge, proud grin. Looks like she never stopped. He raised his glass high. Your Aunt Lila was right. You were never the shiny one. You were the smart one. But I look around tonight, and you're both. You built this astonishing place. But that's just wood and stone. The most important thing you built is this table. When they wouldn't give you a seat, you went and built a whole new banquet hall. He looked right at me, his eyes bright. To Tess, to our girl, who knew how to set her own table. To Tess, the room roared again, and this time the applause was loud. Nova, the photographer, was moving like a ghost. I saw her at the end of the hall, capturing the whole scene, the wide shot, the long, impossible table, the river of candles, the entire wall of glass behind it, opaque with swirling snow. She zoomed in, catching the light of the overhead pendants as they reflected in Aunt Lila's glasses, the silver of the new pin on her scarf flashing as she laughed at something Reese said. As if summoned by the applause, the main kitchen doors swung open. Chef Mateo stepped out, not with a platter, but with a full carving station. And behind him, two of his team carried them, two enormous, magnificent turkeys. The skin was not just brown. It was a deep, lacquered, honey bronze. The aroma hit us, a wave of sage, apple, and roasted thyme. Mateo set the main bird down and picked up a long, wicked sharp knife. He smiled at the table. This, he announced, is a 28-pound cider-brined heritage bird, and it is ready. He made the first cut, right into the breast. The sound was audible from my end of the table, a crisp, definitive shatter of the skin, followed by a silent release of steam. A collective sigh went up from the table. Plates were passed. The table, which had been loud with conversation, quieted into the serious, satisfied sounds of dining. And then, the thanks began to circle. It started with Priya. I'm thankful, she said, to be in a room where I don't have to pretend, and I'm thankful for this stuffing, which I'm pretty sure has changed my life. Ben, my old mentor, laughed. I'm thankful for second chances, for smart kids who grow up to be smart bosses, and for an invitation that came with a new fly rod. I'm thankful for non-conditional relationships, Aunt Lila said, sipping her wine. The kind where you don't have to perform, where you just get to be. I haven't felt that at a holiday table in a very, very long time. Thank you, Tess, for remembering what that feels like. Karen, my cousin, looked up, her eyes wet. I'm thankful for the smell of apples and cinnamon. I'm thankful to be in a room that feels safe enough to cry. Just a little, because it smells exactly like my mom's kitchen. Even Mr. Hartley, the neighbor, spoke up, his voice reedy but clear. I am thankful for an open door when I did not expect one. It means more than you can know. young lady?" The conversation was flowing. The food was disappearing. The room was perfectly balanced, full of warmth and light. And then the doorbell chimed. It was the same chime as before, but this time it was different. It was an interruption. I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. Everyone felt it. The laughter stopped. A nervous silence fell. This was it. This was the other shoe. This was my mother, or Brooke, or both, having driven here in a rage, ready to make a scene, to stand on the doorstep and demand to know what I thought I was doing. My stomach turned to ice. Milo was already moving, his face a mask, but I pushed back my chair. "I'll get it." My footsteps echoed on the stone floor of the entryway. I could feel 35 pairs of eyes on my back. The snow was thick against the small glass panes by the door. I put my hand on the cold iron handle, braced myself, and pulled the door open. She was small, fierce, and covered in snow. A bright red woolen hat was pulled down over her white hair, and flakes were melting on her eyelashes. Her ancient tweed suitcase was on the ground next to her. It was Grandma June. My mouth fell open. "Grandma?" My voice cracked. I couldn't breathe. "But I..." She looked up at me, her eyes as sharp as they'd ever been. "Well, don't just stand there gaping, Tess. I'm freezing my tail off. It's coming down cats and dogs out there. Are you going to let me in or not?" I lunged forward, grabbing her in a hug that was half support, half disbelief, pulling her inside. "But you said your legs. You said the weather. You said you couldn't travel." "Oh, hush," she said, patting my back as I grabbed her suitcase. "My legs are fine, a bit stiff, and the weather's just weather, to be honest." She looked past me, into the warm, bright, crowded room. She took in the table, the candles, the faces. "I just got bored at home. I got to thinking about Ben's terrible jokes and realized I'd better come supervise." I turned, still holding her arm, and looked back at the table. Everyone was on their feet. Uncle Ben's jaw was on the floor. "June," he bellowed, a look of pure childish joy on his face. "Is that really you?" And then the room erupted. It wasn't just applause. It was a standing ovation. Reese and Priya were cheering. Aunt Lila burst into fresh, happy tears. "Told you she was tough," Aunt Lila sobbed to Karen. Mateo, seeing a new, revered guest, was already there with a chair, placing it right next to mine. Nova, who had been capturing the whole thing, stepped forward, her Polaroid camera raised. "Welcome, June," she said. June, without missing a beat, looked right at her. "About time someone took my picture." Click whir. Nova took the small white square, waved it, and walked to the welcome board by the kitchen. It was completely full, a mosaic of joy. She looked for a space, found none, and then, with a small, decisive push, she pinned it right in the dead center, overlapping two other photos. Grandma June's face, bright red hat and all, became the beating heart of the entire wall. The party reformed around her. Karen's kids, who had been sleeping on the sofa, woke up and, seeing the new, exciting old person, immediately gravitated toward her. "Are you the real Grandma?" the 5-year-old asked, leaning on her chair. June looked at me, then at him. "I'm the realest one you're likely to find. Kid, now sit down. Did I ever tell you about the time your Uncle Ben and your dad tried to build a raft to go to Seal Island?" She held court. She was the queen of the table. She was telling stories I hadn't heard in years, and the whole table was hanging on her every word. At one point, she was telling a story about my father, back when he was a teenager. And he was so worried he'd taken a wrong turn on the logging road, got himself lost for 3 hours. But I told him then, and I'll tell you all now. Her gaze swept the table and landed, hard and clear, on me. Sometimes, the long, roundabout path is the straightest way home. You just don't see it until you get there. She raised her glass of water. "To the long path." To the long path, we all echoed. The energy was too good, too bright to be contained. Phones were appearing, but not in the way that shuts a party down. They were being used to document, to share. Reese took a slow-motion video of the candlelight. Priya took a beautiful, artistic shot of the Polaroid board. I saw Aunt Lila post a picture of her, June and Ben, all laughing, and then Karen's post, a simple photo of the table. The caption read, "Thanksgiving at Tess's Silver Basin. I've never felt so welcome. Warmth in every single breath." My own phone, which I'd left face down on a side table, gave a single, angry-sounding vibration. I glanced over. The screen was lit. Missed call. Mom. A second later, a new text message preview lit up the lock screen. "Brooke told me what you said. You need to call me, now." I looked at the message, the capital letters, the demand. I looked up at the room. Grandma June was laughing so hard she had to wipe her eyes. Mr. Hartley was deep in conversation with Reese, gesticulating about fly fishing. The snow was swirling so thickly outside the glass it had erased the world. There was only this room. I walked over to the phone. I picked it up. I pressed the volume down button until the silent icon appeared. Then I turned it completely off. The meal was winding down. People were leaning back, full and happy, nursing coffee and tea. Mr. Hartley caught my eye and smiled. A real, warm, crinkling smile. "You know, Ms. Calloway," he said, his voice quiet. "It's past 9 o'clock. I just realized. My wife, Mary, she used to tease me for always checking my watch, always wanting to get home." He tapped his wrist. "Since she's been gone, I check it all the time. It's a nervous habit. Tonight is the first time in 5 years I forgot to look at it. Thank you for that." "I'm so glad you're here, Miss Hartley." "More hot water, please. Mateo," I called out. "More tea and coffee for everyone." As I was pouring a fresh cup for my grandmother, I felt her watching me. I looked up. She wasn't talking, just observing. She watched me check on Karen's kids, watched me laugh with Priya, watched me hand a blanket to Mr. Hartley. Her face was unreadable for a long moment. Then, she gave a single, small, definitive nod. It was a nod of approval, a nod that said, "You did it. You built the table." I smiled at her and turned back to the window. The snow was a total whiteout, a silent, swirling void, and then, far away, on the distant ridge of the mountain, a light shot into the sky, a bright red flare, arcing against the black, then another, green. It was startling, terrifying for a second. "What is that?" Priya asked, her hand on Reese's arm. Milo, who had been quietly clearing plates, stepped forward. "It's all right," he said, his voice calm. "That's the county search and rescue team. They run their heavy storm drills from that ridge, testing their snow flares." We all watched. The flares, designed for emergencies, for panic, for people lost in the white, looked different from here. From inside, warm and safe, they were silent, brilliant, and strangely beautiful. They looked like fireworks, a private celebration, just for us. The morning after the storm was unnervingly beautiful. The world had been erased and repainted in a single, brilliant, blinding white. The sky was a deep, painful blue, and the sun on the snow was so bright it was hard to look at. The house was quiet. Most of the guests were still sleeping in, exhausted from the travel and the food and the late-night stories. I was in the kitchen, leaning against the quartz countertop, nursing my first cup of coffee. The room smelled like coffee and the lingering, faint sweetness of apple pie. Grandma June was at the head of the long, empty table, reading a book, a small pair of glasses perched on her nose. Reese had joined us, bundled in a ridiculous-looking borrowed robe, scrolling through the photos from last night on his phone. It was peaceful. And then, the peace was shattered. My phone, which I had plugged in and turned back on before bed, was on the counter. It began to vibrate, a harsh, angry buzz against the stone. I looked at the screen. Mom. I ignored it. The ringing stopped. A second later, it started again. A frantic, demanding, Incessant summons. It stopped. It started again. Reese looked up from his phone. Someone's desperate to reach you. That's the third call in a minute. Grandma June closed her book, her finger marking the page. She looked at me over her glasses, her eyes sharp and assessing. "That's not a hello call, Tess," she said, her voice quiet. "That's a what did you do call. Are you going to answer it? Or are you going to let it ruin the morning?" She was right. I was tired of being hunted. I was tired of the unanswered questions and the silent accusations. I picked up the phone. I looked at June. I looked at Reese. They were my family. They were my witnesses. I pressed the green accept button, and then I pressed the speakerphone icon. The sound of my mother's voice, tinny and shrill, filled the quiet kitchen. "Tess? Tess, are you finally answering? What is going on? What did you do?" Her voice wasn't worried. It was furious. "Hello?" "Mom," I said. My voice was calm. The coffee in my mug was hot. The snow outside was bright. I felt anchored. "Don't you hello mom me. The entire internet is full of pictures of your mansion. Karen's posts, Lila's posts, that friend of yours. Thanksgiving at Silver Basin. Warmth in every breath. What kind of stunt are you pulling? Did you fly the entire extended family out to Wyoming just to embarrass us? To make us look like villains?" I took a sip of coffee. "I didn't do anything to you, Mom. I hosted a dinner. I just invited the people you've been uninviting for the last 5 years. It's not my fault your list has gotten so short that everyone else suddenly looks like an army." Reese's eyebrows shot up. He tried to hide a smile behind his coffee mug. Grandma June just listened, her expression unreadable. There was a sputtering sound on the other end, and then my father's voice, gruff and panicked, cut in. Tess, is that you? Your mother's right. This is too much. I don't understand. Where did you get the money for a place like that? We saw the pictures. A house that big. In Wyoming? What's going on? What did you do?" "I sold my company, Dad." "What, Harbor Line? You went back to Harbor Line?" His voice was confused. "No, not Harbor Line. My company, Harbor Flux. The one I founded." "You sold it?" he asked. He sounded dismissive, as if I'd sold a craft project on Etsy. "For what? A few $100,000? That's nice, dear. But this house—" $310 million, I said. The silence that followed was absolute. It was so total, so complete, that I could hear the faint, digital hiss of the open phone line from across the kitchen. The only other sound was Reese, who choked on his coffee. I could hear the sharp, shallow breathing on the other end. Grandma June leaned forward slightly, toward the phone on the counter. "Hello? Alice? Robert?" she called out, her voice clear as a bell. "Did you hear that? 310 million? Seems she's cut out for business after all, wouldn't you say? 300. My mother's voice was a high-pitched, strangled whisper. The anger was gone, replaced by a raw, naked panic. Why didn't you tell us? We didn't know. Tess. We were only trying to keep up appearances, she finally burst out, the excuse tumbling from her. With Evan's family, they're used to certain things. They're important, and having the whole, loud, extended family, it's just not what they do. We were just trying to protect Brooke, to protect our family's image." "Protect your image?" I asked, my voice still quiet, but the coldness in it made Reese look at me. "At the cost of how many people? Who gets voted off the island each year so you can look good for Evan's parents? First it was Ben and Lila, then the cousins, and this year, it was me. Where does it stop? Mom?" "You don't understand what it's like," she shrieked. "Robert, Alice," Grandma June's voice cut through the air like a blade. It was no longer the voice of a gentle grandmother. It was the voice of the matriarch, the one who held all the receipts. Put me on speaker. Put me on speaker right now so Brooke can hear this, too." June, June, don't, my father's voice pleaded, thin and reedy. This isn't the time. It's exactly the time, June snapped. You want to talk about appearances? You want to talk about protecting Brooke and paying for certain things? Let's talk about Tess's college fund. I heard a sharp clatter on the other end of the line. A spoon? A coffee cup dropped in a saucer? It was loud and violent. What? My father gasped. Don't you what me, Robert, June said, her voice steel. You're talking about the appearances you had to keep up for Evan's family. You mean the appearances you paid for with Tess's money? You took her entire college savings, every single dime you and I put away for her since the day she was born, and you used it to pay for Brooke's ridiculously expensive, over-the-top wedding. You used it for the club deposit, for the French champagne, for the $10,000 dress. That's not true, my father yelled. Don't you lie to me, Robert. June's voice was low and dangerous. I co-signed that savings account. I got the bank notification in the mail when you drained it. The whole thing. 2 months before the wedding. The silence on the other end was no longer just silence. It was a vacuum. I looked at Reese. His face was pale. He looked like he was going to be sick. Then, a new voice. Faint. Trembling. What? It was Brooke. No, I didn't know. Mom? Dad? Is that true? Your sister got that full-ride scholarship to Northwind, June continued, her voice relentless, ignoring Brooke. A scholarship she earned because she's brilliant, and you saw your opening. You saw a pot of money that wasn't needed anymore, and instead of giving it to your daughter, the daughter who had earned it, you just took it. You took it because it was the easy way. You stole from your own child. The quiet one. The one who never asked for anything. You took from the path of least resistance. Tess, my mother whispered. Her voice was broken. Tess, we were going to pay it back. We just... I looked at the phone. I wasn't crying. I wasn't shaking. I felt a profound, structural coldness settle into my bones. The old bruise wasn't just a bruise. It was a rot, and June had just cut it out. I finally understood. The science fairs, the coding projects, the empty seats at parents' weekend, the wedding pantry. It wasn't just neglect. It was financial. I wasn't the star, so I was the collateral. I acknowledged the truth, I said, and my voice was so calm it startled even me. I hear you. I finally, hear all of you. I looked at Grandma June. She was watching me, her eyes fierce. She gave me one, small, decisive nod. It was my floor. The excuses, the apologies, they're just words. They're just noise. I'm done with noise. I picked up the phone from the counter. I acknowledge the truth, I said again, my voice clear and final. For the rest, actions will have to speak. I pressed the red end call button. The kitchen was silent. The only sound was the hiss of the coffee maker. Reese let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for the entire conversation. Tess, he said, his voice a whisper. Holy crap, are you okay? I stood there, leaning on the counter, looking out at the blinding, beautiful, empty snow. The line had been cut. The anchor was gone. I felt hollowed out, but I also felt, for the first time, light. Yes, I said. I think I am. The kitchen was profoundly silent after I ended the call. The three of us, me, Reese, and Grandma June, sat in the wreckage. Reese just stared into his empty coffee mug, as if it held the answers. Grandma June had reopened her book, but she wasn't reading. Her eyes were fixed on me. Well, she said finally, her voice soft. The truth is out. Now it's just a carcass on the table. The question is, who has to clean it up? Before I could answer, my phone, which I had left on the counter, buzzed. It wasn't a call. It was a text, not from Mom, but from Brooke. I picked it up. The message was short. I was always jealous of you. You always got to choose your own path. I stared at the words, a bitter laugh building in my throat. Jealous? Jealous of what? Of the mildewed studio apartment? Of the desk made from a hollow door? Of the 16-hour days fueled by instant noodles and terror? She was jealous of the results, not the work. She was jealous of the freedom I had been forced to take because I was never offered the comfortable, pre-paved road of being the chosen one. I typed back, my thumb moving quickly, coldly. I chose it because no one was choosing for me. I hit send, almost immediately. A new text came in, this time from Mom. 2 words. I'm sorry. My breath hitched. I had waited 33 years for those 2 words. I had staged entire, imaginary confrontations in my head, speeches I would make, arguments I would win, all culminating in that single admission. And now, here it was, delivered by text message, probably typed in a panic. It felt small. It felt digital. It felt like a tiny, insufficient plug for a catastrophic breach in the dam. I didn't reply. I couldn't. What was the correct response? Okay? Thank you? Too late? I put the phone face down on the counter. Tess? Reese asked gently. I couldn't be inside. I couldn't look at the phone. I needed air. I needed physics, not emotions. I looked out the massive glass wall. The snow, which had been falling gently, was beginning to pick up. The wind was driving it in horizontal sheets. Karen's 2 kids, the 5-year-old and the toddler, were pressing their hands to the glass, their breath fogging it up. They looked bored. Who wants to build a snow fort? I asked, my voice suddenly loud in the quiet room. Their heads whipped around. A real one? The older one asked. A real one, I said. On the veranda. Get your snowsuits. I didn't wait for them. I pulled on my boots, my heavy coat, and my gloves, and stepped outside. The wind was sharp, biting, and glorious. It felt real. I walked onto the wide stone terrace, into the 2 feet of fresh powder, and began to pack a wall. I dug my gloved hands in, lifted the heavy, wet snow, and packed it down. The kids tumbled out, shrieking with excitement, and started helping, which mostly meant throwing snow at me. I laughed, a real, physical laugh that came from my gut. I was building a wall, but this time, it was one I wanted. It was for them. It was solid. It was something I could touch. After an hour, we had a respectable, waist-high fortress. We were all cold, wet, and happy. As we were finishing, I saw Mr. Hartley, our neighbor, making his way up the path, a small, dusty cardboard box in his arms. Mr. Hartley, I called out, you're brave to be out in this. It's getting thick, he agreed, his breath pluming. He stopped at the edge of the terrace. I saw you all out here, my wife, Mary. She adored this time of year. The time between the holidays. She said the snow was a clean slate. He lifted the box. She collected these, old German glass ornaments. They've just been in the attic. I can't use them, but they should be seen. She would have wanted you to have them, for your beautiful house. He held out the box. I took it, my heart aching. He wasn't just giving me ornaments. He was giving me a piece of his history, of his loss, another person, showing up, offering the real things. Thank you, Mr. Hartley, I said. We will find a perfect place for them. When I came back inside, the house was warm and bustling again. The smell of dill and rich chicken broth was rolling out of the kitchen. Mateo, seeing the half-frozen kids, emerged with a large tureen. Storm food, he announced. Hot chicken soup for everyone. Good for the soul. Nova, the photographer, was still there, quietly documenting. I saw her by the fireplace. Her camera focused on Grandma June. One of the kids had torn the finger of his glove. June, her glasses on, a look of intense concentration on her face, was stitching it closed, the needle, held in her steady. Arthritic fingers, moved in and out, in and out. The yellow firelight caught the silver in her hair and glinted off the needle. It was a simple, quiet act of mending, of repair. I went to the window, a mug of soup warming my hands. Reese came and stood beside me. The snow was a white wall. The world was gone. "So," he said, "that I'm sorry text. That's a new development." I nodded, not looking at him. "Listen, Tess," he said, "I'm your friend, which means I'm not going to give you some greeting card crap about how forgiveness is a gift you give yourself. Sometimes it's just letting someone off the hook when they deserve to be on it." He paused. "But I will say this. Forgiveness doesn't mean you have to forget the boundary. It doesn't mean you let them back in to do it again. You can forgive them and still change the locks. You can forgive them and still hold them accountable." "Change the locks," I repeated. I thought of the one locked door in the house, my office. I handed him my empty mug. "I'll be right back." I walked down the hall, the sound of laughter from the great room feeling distant. I stood in front of my office. I took the key from my pocket and unlocked it. The room was cold. I hit the light switch. There they were, the trophies, the wall of proof I had been assembling my entire adult life. The Forbes 30 Under 30 cover, the Wired article, the Invisible Code of Harbor Flux, the Economist feature on logistics security, and on the desk, the stack of letters, the thank you note from the community center for the anonymous donation that funded Mateo's cooking class, the letters from the first 3 recipients of the anonymous Northwind Women in Tech scholarship I had endowed. This was the arsenal. This was the evidence I was going to present to my parents. "See? I am worthy. See? I did it." And as I stood there, the truth of Grandma June's words from the phone call hit me. They hadn't just missed my worth. They had cashed it out. They didn't care about this wall. They wouldn't have been proud. They would have been calculating. They would have seen this room, not as proof of my value, but as proof of a resource they had failed to exploit. The anger was gone, replaced by a deep, profound, Arctic cold. "You were going to use these, weren't you?" Grandma June was standing in the doorway. She hadn't followed me. She just knew. I nodded, unable to speak. She walked in, her movements slow, and ran a finger over the glass of the Forbes frame. "They're beautiful. Tess, you built an empire. You should be proud." She turned to me. "But don't ever mix up your accomplishments with your value. These," she motioned to the wall, "these are what you did. They are not who you are." She looked me dead in the eye. "You can put them out on the table like cards, if you must, but you cannot make them a test. They are not a test they have to pass to earn you back, because they will fail, and it will break your heart all over again, or they will pass, and you will always wonder if they're here for you, or for this." Right on cue, the lights in the room flickered. They buzzed, went dim, and then went out entirely. We were plunged into absolute, pitch-black darkness. A second later, a low, powerful thrum vibrated through the floorboards, and the lights came back on, but at a lower, dimmer level. The emergency system. Milo appeared in the hallway, a heavy-duty flashlight in his hand. "We're on the generator, Ms. Calloway. Storm took the main line down. It's worse than they predicted, but I've got fuel for at least 12 hours. We're secure. The house is locked down." The house was secure, but I was not. The kids, thrilled by the adventure, ran to the Polaroid board. Nova helped them take a picture of the window, a strange, flat, bright white square from the flash against the dark glass. The 5-year-old took a marker and wrote on the bottom of it, "Snow is the hidden line." I stared at the photo, the hidden line, the boundary. I went back to the long dining table. I opened my laptop, the battery icon showing it was running just fine. I opened a new document. I typed, "Conditions for starting over." I typed, 1. Full acknowledgement of the theft of the college fund and a plan for repayment. I typed, 2. Mandated family therapy, no negotiation. I typed, 3. No more comparisons, no more Brooks family. I looked at the list. It felt like a legal summons. It felt cold. It felt, I realized, exactly like them. June was right. Reese was right. It wasn't a contract. It wasn't a test. It was a boundary. I deleted the file. I made my decision. The house was a liability, The trophies were a distraction. If they were ever to come back into my life, they had to come for me. The 12-year-old with the second-place ribbon, the 15-year-old with the deleted script, the 33-year-old woman who had just had her heart ripped out and her bank account seen as the only prize. They had to come for her. I picked up my phone. I opened the message thread with my mother. The "I'm sorry" sat there, black on white, unanswered. My thumbs were steady. I knew exactly what to do. I was not asking for a test. I was not demanding a trial. I was just opening the door, a tiny crack, to see if they would walk through it, or if they would try to kick it down. I typed one sentence. Come tomorrow, just you, Dad, and Brooke, if you really truly want to talk. I hit send. Outside, the storm howled, a physical shrieking sound, but inside, in the warm, generator-lit house, surrounded by the family I had built, it was quiet. I had set the terms. The new morning was sharp and clean. The storm had passed, leaving a silence so profound it felt like the world was holding its breath. The sky was a high, cloudless, cutting blue. The sun on the fresh, deep snow was blinding. The house was stirring. The guests, my new family, were emerging from their rooms, drawn to the kitchen by the smell of coffee and Mateo's breakfast. I had slept, for the first time in a week, a deep, dreamless, and absolute sleep. I felt rested. I felt clear. Before I joined them, I walked down the hall to my locked office. I unlocked it, the click of the tumbler loud in the quiet house. I stood for a moment, looking at the wall of my accomplishments, my trophies, my proof. Yesterday, they had felt like an arsenal. This morning, they just looked like paper. Grandma June's words echoed in my head. They are not who you are. I didn't want the whole wall. I just wanted the truth. I took one single frame off the wall, not Forbes, but the Wired article, the one that had a technical diagram of my Harbor Flux architecture. I took one of the thank you letters, the one from the community center, the one that mentioned Mateo's class. Then I went to my desk and found the one thing that mattered more than all the frames. It was an old, faded photograph, taken 8 years ago. It was me, 25 years old and exhausted, standing in the garage of my old mildewed apartment. I was grinning, holding up the 2 sawhorses, and next to me was Grandma June, her hair still mostly dark, holding the hollow core door we had found in the alley. It was the day we built my desk. I carried those 3 things, the frame, the letter, and the photograph, into the great room. I didn't put them on the main table. I set up a small, simple wooden console table by the glass wall, a place where the bright morning light would hit it. I stood the wired frame in the back. I laid the letter flat, and in the very front, I placed the photograph of me and June, my real foundation. I found the small chalkboard Nova had used for the Polaroid board. I wiped it clean. With a piece of white chalk, I wrote 5 words on it, in my neat, engineering script. Thank you for showing up. I placed the sign next to the photograph. It was not a shrine to my success. It was a monument to my support. I turned to the main dining table, where people were gathering with plates of eggs and mugs of coffee. I pulled out a large, rolled sheet of parchment. I'd drawn it myself, late last night. It wasn't a family tree. Those are rigid, hierarchical, and built on exclusion. This was a map. In the center, it just said, Silver Basin, and lines radiated outward like a constellation, connecting names and places. Good morning, I said, my voice carrying. I have one more small piece of housekeeping. I unrolled the map. This is our chart, a map of everyone who was here for the first Thanksgiving. I want you all to sign it, not just your name. Sign your name and write the one thing you're most thankful for. This is our founding document. A pen was passed around. People laughed, then grew quiet as they thought, then signed, Lila, thankful for non-conditional love. Reese, thankful for old friends and new firewalls. Mr. Hartley, thankful for open doors. When the pen came to me, I signed my name, Tess, thankful for the long path home. As they were finishing, I stood up again. One last announcement. Yesterday, a lot of things were put in perspective for me. I looked at Grandma June. It was made very clear to me how much a small opportunity, or the lack of one, can change a life. My life was changed because I had a scholarship, something I earned, but I also had a college fund, something I lost. The room was quiet. So, I said, I've decided to formalize the idea of showing up this morning. I endowed a new foundation. I'm calling it the Show Up Fund, every year. Starting now, it will grant 3 full, 5-year technology and trade apprenticeships to any of the younger members of this extended family. It will cover tuition, housing, and tools, with no conditions for repayment. A gasp went up from my cousin Karen, who was looking at her 5-year-old son, the one who loved to draw. I won't let a lack of money be the thing that keeps the next generation of this family from building their own table, I said. This is my promise to you. There was applause, but more than that, there were hugs. Karen cried. Uncle Ben just clapped me on the shoulder, his eyes full. I had one more piece of paper. It was a legal document, drawn up by my lawyers in Portland and emailed to me this morning. I walked over to Grandma June. Grandma, I said, I have something for you. I handed her the document. She put on her glasses and read it. Her face didn't change, but her hands, I saw, were trembling just slightly. Tess, this is legal, she whispered. It is, I said. It grants you, June Calloway, lifetime residency, and full use of the 3-bedroom guest house, its assets, and a stipend for its upkeep, effective immediately. It's yours, not a gift, a right. You are the matriarch. You deserve an estate. June folded the paper carefully. She looked up at me, a slow, sly smile spreading across her face. Well, she said, in that case, I pick the room with the morning sun, and I'm going to need a better reading lamp. Consider it done, I laughed. The day settled into a rhythm of quiet connection. The pressure of the holiday was gone, replaced by the simple, warm pleasure of coexistence. As the afternoon light began to fade, the rituals of departure and closure began. Mr. Hartley came over to me, his hat in his hands. I must be getting home before the light goes, he said. This was a gift. Ms. Calloway. He fumbled in his pocket. I wanted to give you this. It's silly. Just an old thing. He pressed something small and cold into my hand. I opened my palm. It was a simple keychain. The leather was worn soft, and the silver medallion attached was tarnished. It was engraved with a single M. It was Mary's, he said, his voice thick. My wife. She loved this valley. She always used to say that all she wanted was a house full of noise, and art, and good arguments, and kids who felt safe enough to be loud. He looked around the great room, at Aunt Lila sketching by the fire, at the kids playing a board game. I came here, and I saw what she was always hoping for. She would have wanted you to have this. I closed my hand around the keychain. I will treasure it. Mr. Hartley, thank you. Nova, the photographer, found me next. She was holding a large, heavy, square object wrapped in cloth. My work is done, she said. She unwrapped it. It was a thick, wooden-bound album. Carved deeply into the polished pine cover were 4 words. Those who showed up. I opened it. Inside, the Polaroid pictures were perfectly mounted. One to a page. Ben, stunned in the entryway. Karen, crying at the smell of apple pie. June, sewing the torn glove. The kids, covered in snow. The empty, snowy window with the words, "Snow is the hidden line." It was the story. It was the evidence. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever owned. Nova, I don't know what to say. You don't have to, she said. It was an honor. Even Mateo had a final ritual. As he and his team were cleaning the kitchen, he brought out a small, vintage tin box. We are leaving you with leftovers, he said. But I wanted to leave this, too. This box is for the house. I put my recipe for the cider brined turkey in it. He placed a handwritten recipe card inside. My gift, I suggest, he said, looking at the others, that everyone else does the same. A house needs its own collection of family secrets. Aunt Lila immediately ran to get her recipe for bohemian bread. The house was safe, the new family was solidified, but the old one was still out there. I found a quiet corner. I pulled out my phone, my message from last night. Come tomorrow, if you really, truly want to talk. Had a reply. One word, sent at dawn. We will. I needed to set one last boundary. I opened a new text, to Brooke alone. I typed, if you come today, you need to come as you, not as Mom's daughter, or Evan's wife, or the image they built. Come as Brooke, or don't come at all. I hit send. As evening approached, the energy in the house shifted. It was time. Milo, ever present, had been working all afternoon. The long, winding driveway, buried in 4 feet of snow, was now a clear, dark path. I saw him outside in the twilight, hanging string lights along the entryway. He was illuminating the path. He was preparing the landing. I went to my room. I stood in front of the mirror. I looked at my own face. I was not the same woman who had received that text message 3 days ago. I was not the CEO. I was not the victim. I was just Tess. I looked at the smartwatch on my wrist. The screen showed my steps, my resting heart rate, my sleep patterns. I was always measuring, always checking the data. I unclasped it. I took it off. I set it face down on the dresser. Tonight, I would not be measuring my heart rate. I would just be feeling it. I walked back out to the great room. Grandma June was standing by the door, watching the dusk settle. She had changed into a bright red cashmere sweater, pinned to the shoulder. Flashing in the firelight was the Art Depth Art Deco pin I had given Aunt Lila. Lila must have given it to her, a passing of the torch. June looked at me, her eyes clear and steady. It's time to open the door. Tess, she said. I nodded. I walked to the massive oak door. I turned the handle. I pulled it open. A rush of intensely cold, pure mountain air filled the entryway. It was sharp and clean. Then, the air settled. The wind was still. The world was waiting. From the end of the driveway, I saw the headlights of a single car, moving slowly. And then, for the 3rd time in 2 days, the doorbell chimed. I stood at the open door, the cold air washing over my face. The headlights of the single taxi cut through the blue twilight, illuminating the falling snow that had just begun again. The car stopped. The doors opened. First, my father stepped out. He got out of the car and just stood, his hand on the open door, looking up. He looked small against the backdrop of the massive timber and glass house. Then, my mother. She emerged from the other side, pulling her thin coat tight. Her eyes went from the house to the valley, to the mountains, and her hand went to her mouth. Then, Evan, he looked stunned, his head swiveling as he did the quick, silent math of what this place must have cost. Finally, Brooke. She stepped out and, unlike the others, she just looked at me, standing in the warm, open doorway. They walked up the stone path, each step hesitant, as if they were approaching a place that shouldn't exist, a mirage in the snow. They stepped onto the veranda. My father looked at the thick timber beams, his gaze critical, then impressed. Tess, he said, his voice a low, rough sound. This is... My mother just stared past me, into the great room, at the long table, at the warm fire, at the faces of all the people she had excluded. Her face was pale. They stepped inside, one by one, bringing the smell of cold air and attention so thick it was suffocating. They stood, clustered in the entryway, a small, freezing island in the middle of my warmth. And in that exact, perfect, dramatically timed moment, the lights went out. It was not a flicker. It was a sudden, absolute, heavy death. The thrum of the generator, which had been a subtle vibration beneath our feet, ceased. The lights in the great room, the kitchen, the hallways, all gone. We were plunged into a profound, shocking darkness. The only light in the entire massive house came from the deep, orange-red glow of the fireplace at the far end of the room. A child cried out in the darkness. Someone gasped. I heard my mother's sharp, terrified intake of breath. What happened? Stay calm. My voice cut through the dark, loud and clear. It wasn't a request. It was an order. I was back in charge. This was a system failure. This I knew how to fix. Milo, I yelled. On it. His voice came from the darkness near the kitchen. The generator must have iced over. I'm going to the machine room. I heard the sound of his heavy boots running. I didn't wait. I felt my way to the small side table where I'd left my heavy-duty flashlight. My fingers found the cold metal. I clicked it on. The beam was so bright it was like a sword, cutting the darkness. I panned the light across the room. I saw the faces, pale and worried, staring at me, lit like actors in a play. My parents and Brooke were frozen by the door. My guests were rising from their seats. Nobody panic, I said. Milo and I have this. The main line is down. This is just the backup. We just need to reset it. I swung the beam of light. Reese, Priya, you're on kid duty. Get all the children into the main living room, right in front of the fireplace. Grab all the blankets from the sofas. Make it a game. Now. Got it, Reese said, his voice instantly steady. Aunt Lila, Uncle Ben, start gathering the candles from the table and bring them to the fireplace. We need a central light source. Mateo, I yelled toward the kitchen. Here, chef, his voice came back. Keep those oven doors closed. Don't lose the heat. Anything you have on the stove. Get a lid on it. Preserve all the thermal energy you can. Already done, chef. I turned the beam of light onto my family. They were still standing there, useless. Shadows in the hall. Don't just stand there, I snapped. My voice was pure, cold, operational. Get in, get out of the cold. Move to the fireplace and stay out of the way. They scrambled, stumbling over each other to get to the fire. I didn't watch them. I was already moving toward the basement door that led to the machine room, the flashlight beam cutting a path. I heard Milo's heavy footsteps below. I took the stairs 2 at a time. The machine room was cold. Milo was already at the main generator unit, a massive diesel engine. His own flashlight beam pointed at the control panel. It's the intake, he said, not looking at me. The storm was worse than we thought. The ice buildup must have choked the air filter. It overheated the kill switch. Did it freeze the line? I asked, my light moving over the fuel gauges, the pressure meters. No, fuel is fine. Pressure is dropping. We need to reset the main breaker. But we have to clear the intake first, or it'll just shut down again. I've got the breaker. You clear the intake. He grabbed a tool and ran outside to the external housing. I moved to the main electrical panel, a wall of gray metal. I flipped open the heavy cover. It was a complex web of switches. I knew this system. I had designed its redundancy. I knew its failure points. My light found the main breaker. I put my gloved hand on it and threw my weight, pushing it to the off position. The house was now fully, truly dead. Clear, Milo yelled from outside. Clear, I yelled back. I took a breath. I braced myself, and I slammed the breaker back to on. There was a half-second of silence. Then, a deep, shuddering cough. The generator sputtered. The lights flickered. A weak, sickly orange. It sputtered again. Come on, I whispered. Come on. Then, the roar. The deep, vibrating thrum returned, 1,000 times louder in the concrete room. The lights in the machine room snapped on, blindingly bright. We have power, Milo yelled from the doorway, snow on his shoulders. Resetting the internal zones now, I called. I went to the secondary panel, flipping the breakers one by one. Kitchen, great room, guest house, west wing. I ran back up the stairs. The hallway was lit. The kitchen was lit. I walked into the great room. The light was bright, warm, and total, and in that light, everyone was revealed. The guests were clustered around the fireplace, blankets over their shoulders. Reese was in the middle of a story for the kids. And my parents and Brooke were standing in the middle of the room, looking exposed. My mother was standing right by the kitchen island. She was staring at me as I walked in, my flashlight still in my hand, my face probably smudged. She just stared, and then, in the bright, clear, unwavering light, she spoke. Her voice was not a whisper. It was loud, loud enough for everyone in that room to hear. "I was wrong," she said. My father turned to look at her, his face ashen. "I was wrong, Tess," she said again, her eyes locked on mine. "I've been wrong for years. I put appearances over people. I put Evan's parents, and the house, and the idea of our family, above my own family, above you. I was wrong, and I am so sorry." It was not a text. It was not an excuse. It was a confession. My father, who had been staring at the floor, looked up. He took a step forward. "She's right," he said, his voice thick. What June said, it was true. I took your college fund. I took it without asking. I told myself it was just borrowing, that I'd pay it back, but I never did. It was theft, and I take full responsibility for that. There is no excuse. I didn't say anything. I just watched them. I was no longer an operator. I was just a daughter. Brooke had been silent this whole time, just staring at her phone, her thumb endlessly scrolling. But when my father spoke, she stopped. She looked at her phone. She pressed the button on the side, and the screen went dark. She put it in her pocket. She walked away from them, toward me. She stopped a foot in front of me. Her eyes were red. "I heard what you texted me," she said, her voice quiet. "Just for me. You were right. I've been a role. I've been the perfect one for so long. I forgot how to just be. Brooke, and I was jealous. God, I was so jealous of you. Because you got out. I didn't know. I didn't know about the money. Tess, I swear I didn't." She took a shaky breath. "If it's okay," she said, her voice breaking. I would really like to start over, if you'll let me, just as two women, not as the roles they cast for us." And then she did something she hadn't done since we were children, before the competition and the trophies and the chill. She reached out and hugged me. It was a clumsy, desperate, real hug. I stood there for a moment, rigid, my arms still at my sides. I felt the eyes of the room on me. I looked over Brooke's shoulder. Grandma June was watching, her face unreadable. She gave a single, slow, infinitesimal nod. Reese caught my eye and squeezed his own hand, a gesture of support. Mateo, standing in the kitchen doorway, just smiled. My arms, slowly, came up and held my sister. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay, Brooke." We pulled apart. I took a step back. I looked at my parents. The boundary was set. Now, the agreement. "I hear you," I said, and my voice was my own again, calm. "Both of you, I accept your apology." I held up a hand. "But an apology is just the beginning. The old way is over. It's done." I walked over to the long table, to the parchment map that everyone had signed. "These are my new rules," I said, my voice clear and strong. "There are no more comparisons, ever. No one is measured against anyone else, and no one, ever again, gets kicked out of this family for the sake of appearances. No one gets excluded to make someone else comfortable. This family is a table, not a fortress. If you cannot keep those rules, you do not get a seat, period." My mother looked at my father. He nodded. We understand." "Tess," my mother said, "we agree. Whatever you say." "Then sit down," I said, pointing to the empty chairs, "and sign the map." They did. It was not a grand gesture. It was a quiet act of capitulation. They sat, took the pen, and signed their names to the document of my new family. I let them sit there for a moment. Then I walked to the locked office door. I took the key from my pocket. I unlocked it. They tensed, as if expecting a final, damning piece of evidence. I opened the door. I turned on the light, the wall of frames. the magazine covers, the letters, all of it, gleamed. "This is my life," I said, not looking at them, but at the wall. "This is the part you missed, the part you didn't ask about. I'm not showing you this as a negotiation. It's not proof. It's not a weapon. It's just my life." My mother stood up and walked to the door. She looked at the Forbes cover. She looked at the letter from the community center. She looked at the picture of me and June, with our hollow door desk. We brought you something," she said, her voice small. She went to the hallway, where they had dropped their bags. She pulled out a flat, wrapped package. I didn't know what to get. I know you love it here. I researched local artists." She handed me the package. I unwrapped it. It was two small, beautiful oil paintings of the Teton mountain range, the same view I had from my window. They were simple, honest, and beautiful. "Thank you, Mom," I said. "They're perfect." My father cleared his throat. He reached into his own coat pocket. He pulled out a small, heavy box. I noticed," he said, gesturing to the massive glass walls. "These big doors, in this weather. The hinges are going to need constant calibration. The seals will shrink. I know you," he said, looking at me. "I know you like to fix things yourself." I opened the box. It was a high-end, German-engineered precision screwdriver set, the kind for technical calibration. It was a tool, a useful, practical, thoughtful tool. He had seen me. "Thank you, Dad," I said. The crisis was over. The chill had broken. The house slowly reformed. My guests, my real family, came over. They introduced themselves. Aunt Lila, pointedly wearing her pin, offered my mother a glass of wine. Uncle Ben, bless him, was already telling my father about the new fly rod. We all gathered around the long table. The candles were low. The food was warm. Outside, the wind was gone, and the only sound was the soft, rhythmic drip, drip of snow melting from the eaves. Mr. Hartley, who had watched the entire exchange with a quiet wisdom, stood up. He raised his glass of water. "A toast," he said, his voice clear. "To the people who get locked out, and who have the courage to not only find a new key, but to build a whole new house, and who, after all that, still have the grace to open the door when the ones who lock them out finally come knocking." He looked at me. "To Tess, and to open doors." "To Tess," the room murmured, "to open doors." I looked down the table. My family, old and new, was a quiet, complex, damaged, and hopeful mosaic. I turned to Grandma June, who was sitting beside me, sipping her tea. "Will you stay a while longer, Grandma?" I asked, my voice low. "The guest house is all yours. You can have the room with the morning sun." She reached out and patted my hand. Her skin was like paper, her grip like steel. "I'm not going anywhere, dear," she said, smiling. "I already have my room." Later that night, long after everyone was asleep, I sat in the great room, just watching the moonlight on the snow. My phone was on the table, silent. I picked it up. I opened my message thread with my mother. I thought for a long time. Then I typed one. Simple, definitive text. "Christmas. A small group. No performance. No trophies. Come to be present." I set the phone down. A minute later, it lit up. One new message. "We will come to be present." Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where in the world you're tuning in from. So drop a comment below and share your thoughts. Please subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and give it an extra boost by hitting the hype button so more people can find and hear this story.